real life, and we all have our moments. It's hard. It's hard to be a human on this planet right now, and there are many people who are kind of burying their head in the sand and just, going for the zombie thing because it's easier. And one thing that I will say that is my big message right now is the majority of the people on the planet want to live in a generous way. If you can become in any way an inspiration to another human being, that's a victory.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Today we're having the Rama Global Impact Panel, sponsored by Rama Foundation, as part of this fundraiser today to support all of our programs, Rama East, our by donation studio, as well as our scholarship programs. So we've brought these panelists here to discuss a little bit about what the state of mental health is in the world, how we can affect it, and Kundalini Yoga and meditation, as I think most of us here have experienced, is a really powerful tool for that. And each of these panels has a really unique perspective. So I hope you enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you. We want to do more of these. I mean, as I always talk about, all we want to do is panels, and we haven't had one for a couple months. I've been feeling like, what are we going to do? We need a panel. So thank you all for this panel. But we want to do more of this. Specifically with different kind of impact conversations and different kind of social justice conversations, and culminating next year in something that we're going to be creating, we're in the midst of creating right now, called Rama Talks, which will be a kind of a whole experience of different talks and different conversations like these, but it'll be a whole however long. We haven't decided yet. I got a call from Honey Jeevan this morning at 5 a.m. and he was like, "I'm in northern Russia. I'm overlooking the Finnish Sea, and I'm thinking of you." No, he was saying that he wants to have. We're gonna bring Rama Festival to Russia this summer, and he was like, "I have a really good idea. Let's have Rama Festival in Russia this summer." No, you're gonna have a nervous breakdown right now, Joanna. And then he was like, "It's gonna be 6 days," and I was like, "I'm sorry, 6 days." Rama Festival was 3 days this year, and it was enough for us. So we don't know how long Rama Talks are going to be, but something like a day probably. Let's just keep it concise. When he said 6 days, I was like, oh, Joanna Pitt is going to kill me. But we want to have more conversations like these. I think it's an important time, and this kind of place, all of these spaces on the planet, these Rama spaces, virtually and in person, are places where we have conversations like these. And I think a lot happens here on all sorts of levels, and that's why even when I constructed this first Rama, we constructed it in a way that these types of conversations could happen here in all of the levels that we work. And that's, the different dimensional kind of spaces. So a lot happens in the talking and in the practice and in the creation and in the delivery and the generation, the organization, the delivering power of these Rama spaces. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you all for being here. I want to introduce these amazing people on the panel. Some of you know some of them, and maybe you don't know all of them. And then we also have a panelist who's been affected by the Malibu evacuation. So JC can't be with us, but sending him a shout out because he's such an amazing man, and hopefully we'll be able to talk to him again. To my left, Paula Miley. Paula is doing a lot at our by donation wellness space on West Adams and Normandy, Rama East, and also doing a lot for the community in all sorts of ways. And I'm just going to read what it says here, which I normally don't do, but we did White Tantric Yoga yesterday, and this is my brain on White Tantric Yoga. Ready? A healer, trauma therapist, Kundalini Yoga teacher. You work extensively both for Yoga for Youth, which is an amazing organization, and then also you work extensively in all sorts of mental health communities as well.
Yes, so we do the LGBTQI community as well, suicide prevention, crisis line response. So basically where there's a need for empowerment, I try to show up as much as possible.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
You.
Thank you for everything you're doing. To her left, Erica Berger, and Erica is. We had the New York lock of the hearts and eyes at teacher training. When was that? Was that September? And then Erica told me what she does, and I was like, we need to have a conversation, so thank you for being here. Erica is an award-winning journalist, New York-based, now LA-based, host, strategist, investor. I want to hear about that. Passionate about cities, community, environment, spirit, intersection of storytelling and social good, which is such a powerful intersection. And then you have a podcast called TBD, which is a great name. I love this. A podcast about success and uncertainty. That's a very cool way of putting it. So, and then you're doing a documentary right now on plants and politics. Don't tell me it's ayahuasca. Go ahead.
It's about hemp.
Okay.
No, it's, I don't want to talk about psychedelics or ayahuasca on this panel.
Okay. I was like, oh, here we go.
No, but hemp is interesting because it brings ultra-conservative farmer types in Kentucky together with people like the people in this room who are interested in CBD. So it's all about telling stories that bring us across the aisle and back together and also integrate us with the planet. So
cool. Thank you, Erica. And many of you know, and if you don't know, or if you haven't been to class with Mikal Vega, you have to come to his class on 11 a.m. on Sundays. Were some of you just in his class? Are you feeling so good right now? The women I brought to your class a month ago were still smooth. There's all sorts of WhatsApp messages still about this, Mikal. The impact was a big impact. What'd you say? Mikal is a veteran and a founder of Vital Warrior, which is an amazing nonprofit that is bringing all sorts of wellness technologies to veterans, the veteran community, Kundalini Yoga teacher, and an incredible filmmaker. And I got to see this film that he's been working on one of the trains and automobiles we took in India, and we had a lot of opportunity, but it was real. All of us were just weeping. It's so beautiful. Thank you for the work you're doing. Of course. All right, and my name is Guru Jagat. I hold the microphone with one hand. Okay, here we go. I don't even know where Huddy Jeevan got that joke, but it's some Oprah reference. Does anybody know? I should look it up. He's always like, you just tell them you're Guru Jagat, you hold the microphone with one hand. I have no idea. Okay, so I was making the joke this morning, which nobody laughed at, but later on, people came up to me after class and told me they thought it was funny. I appreciate that. It was like, you were really funny this morning. It's like the consolation. I didn't laugh in class, but after. So I was talking about basically, part of what we're trying to do with Rama Foundation is to break the bubble of what happens in the wellness scene, and all of us have the great opportunity to be here practicing yoga on whatever day we choose, and it's such a privilege. And part of the reason why we created Rama East was to see what we could do about breaking that bubble, and I think there's all sorts of really deep conversation about that in terms of what the notions are for kind of the naivete of wanting to bring wellness to people who would benefit from it but may or may not be actually interested in it, and then also just the other side, which is a lot of change is affected, and I think all of us in our different communities have seen that. So I'd love to just start the conversation right there, where where you've seen on the front lines that bringing your experience to whatever communities that you're working with, how that's both the dark side of that and your notions or naivete about that, and also what has happened on the other side. I think the polarity of this is a really important conversation, especially, Emily and I talk about it every day, just like how much this is part of how we can really, make greater change, which is really looking at all sides of the Rubik's Cube of this. So anybody can jump in. Paula, you're welcome to.
Just keep it in order.
Yeah, let's keep it in order.
Well, I really like how you said a polarity in that sense of duality, and like how so many times as a society we're not aware that we're self-limiting within our own pain, within our own experience, or that the options are accessible to us. And so teaching at Rama East, being from LA and not having access to mental health care, sometimes health care, quite honestly, depending on where my mom was at in her struggle, not having the means or teachers or adults to look up to in order to find another way, and believing that those four corners of my neighborhood were the extent of it. And often what I found, what I love talking about now as an adult, is just the trauma response that we didn't have a chance to process. That your best friend's brother was murdered, or your own relative was murdered, and it's not seen from a mental health standpoint. It's, oh, that's how this is. And so I really appreciate being able to come in with that perspective and not pushing an agenda. Simply speaking from that place of awareness and saying, you know, Mikal and I were talking, hey, this is here, here's an option. Get to know me, see how it moves in my life, and maybe it can affect yours. And I think the maybe in being open and invitational within any circumstance or any culture that you're new to is always going to go a long way. So I appreciate stepping out of the if and concept of duality.
And do you, in that, have you, you know, what are the barriers to entry? What do you see people come up against besides, you know, some of the just the strangeness of like the way the Kundalini people look, or
Right,
but
right.
what are the barriers to entry that you see, like in terms of the kind of educational piece, or just, you know, how to cross that barrier, that bridge?
Especially working with the children I work with at Yoga for Youth, I find that sitting with yourself and actually checking in with how you feel is such a new experience when you're only accustomed to surviving. When your only goal is to just get through this day, get home and not go through whatever, and get back to school, do it all over again, you're on a constant sense of alert and vigilance. And I find that, you know, doing the kriyas and the poses is much simpler than asking to sit and breathe with one another, to track how you're feeling. I find, honestly, the point of entry is a lot of that. It's so foreign in that way. I don't know myself or my experience, and it's never been safe to ask. And so creating a space of safety first in our yoga studios, in our hearts, in our openness, I believe that's been the way to overcome that initial point of entry, fear and aversion.
Beautiful, thank you.
Thank you.
That was really beautiful to just hear.
Yeah.
Like, I really honor the work that you do. I work more in high-level media and policy environments, and whether or not people liked it in New York, I was one of the first people pushing the media industry to be more conscientious about what we were publishing and what we were driving people to click on. And this was like 4 or 5 years ago, so before the din of 2016, and before mindfulness was a trending word. And it was incredibly challenging. I think it still is incredibly challenging to not only apply this work to the physical spaces we're in, and to the neighborhoods we're in, and to our daily lives, but into the way we think about how we're putting out knowledge and words into the world. And what hasn't worked is just saying, sit with yourself and really consider what you're doing, because at the end of the day, when we publish in the news cycle, when we talk about policy, when we affect change around the world, there's something else driving it. There's a business model, or there's a longer term intention. What does work is more physical exercises, breathing. Like, what I've seen shift people more from their go, 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 go mentality to a hold on, is this really authentic? Is this really going to be good for the world? Is something more physical, is breathing, is meeting people where they're at versus trying to bring them to where we're at. And that's what you just said too, that I was like, wow, same thing.
Yes. Absolutely.
It all goes back to embodiment and to meeting people where they're at.
Is it your experience that the journalists are actually drinking the Kool-Aid of the fear-mongering, or they're just, like, it's like Escobar never snorted any cocaine?
I think it's a combination of things. I think it all goes back to money, which is a whole different panel. Or sure, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So when you're a journalist, or when you're a policymaker, or when you're working for a lobbyist, or you have to make money to be able to survive. And so you're playing into this system. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm like Midwestern. I'm like slightly a conspiracy theorist, but I'm more like punk rock than that. Right. And I think you don't realize what you're doing until you realize what you're doing. And then when you try to change things, there's a lot of situations and a lot of infrastructure that's working against that. So I think, it's also back to success. Like, when you start to get more success in journalism, in policy, in impact, in leadership, right? We've got this like cult of leadership these days where you need to be a leader even if you don't have a community who's following you. When you start to get success, it's like this feedback, and you keep playing into it, and it takes something major to pull you out of it, or it takes finding Kundalini or breath work, or traveling somewhere and having an experience, or having trauma happen to really kind of reorganize the way you think about how you're operating.
Yeah. And also, are you finding that some people in the journalistic scene are getting success actually from telling more, from breaking the matrix these days?
More now, really in like the last 2 to 3 years. Yeah. But it took some major political upheaval and disasters globally to kind of get us there. Before, like, people were playing in the matrix and winning in the matrix. Yeah. And now finally some people are doing things that are very left of center. But it took a while. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure there's going to be more of that, where that came from. So, welcome to the Crane Age. Mikal, talk to us about the veteran population and.
Okay, so my experience with, and you brought up a very good point, and is the precursor to how I got to where I was today with Vital Warrior, which isn't anywhere near where we want to be, but we're steadily moving towards that, is initially when I had the concept of starting a nonprofit, I did the system of going to the VA and trying to get them to incorporate something that I discovered to be a very effective system for increasing performance and resiliency by mitigating stress non-pharmaceutically, using primarily Kundalini Yoga as the foundation of developing awareness of what it is we're projecting and how to increase that awareness and power to be able to circumvent obstacles and punch through fear, which was the subject of the class today. What I found was that all my cycles were being eaten up by lobbying the VA or these other large nonprofit organizations like Wounded Warrior and these types of things that are these huge machines that aren't hearing the little voice here going, hey, we have to address this thing from the roots. The roots being the people that need the help. And then after saying that so many times, it's like, oh, I'm telling myself what I need to do. You know what I mean? So I stopped doing that, and I just started broadcasting. Started broadcasting through you and Rama, and we're super appreciative of that, and a number of other organizations. And what I found is that in the veterans community and the active duty communities, they're very reclusive and they stick to themselves. So Rama TV was a huge in. Yeah. Like, they can do it from the inside of their house. Nobody's judging them or seeing them, or they reach out to us, and we value anonymity like big time. So it's like you request it, you prove you're a veteran or in the active duty community, and we provide. And then what you do with that is up to you. And we're not sitting there going, hey, how you doing? Tell us what, we're not trying to get anything from anybody. We just broadcast. And from coming from that perspective, if anybody's out there trying to help veterans and everything like that, you'll know that one of the biggest frustrations is you can be providing things and not as many people as you want to be taking advantage of it are. So in Vital Warrior's case, I came at this thing, I think one of the biggest blocks that you were asking about is the perception that has been developed in society around yoga, meditation, breath, mindful breath, connecting to spirit, all these types of things. Somehow,
we don't know how. So weird, you know what I mean?
Somehow, along the line, a program's been installed to where that's feminine and weak, and in the war fighter's mindset, it's like they want to focus on how to be better and more effective and destructive on the target. In reality, that's what it is. How to better carry out that mission, developing a destructive force. And so what happens is through the development of that destructive force, they come home and they don't have an enemy to unleash it on, and they create one within themselves, and that energy turns inward, and they start destroying themselves, committing suicide 22 a day. Right? That's what we're facing. So how do we do anything with that if they have that mindset? Well, we remind them that all throughout history, these warrior societies that they've modeled themselves after, and this is one of the ends. This is the seed of the end. Look, this isn't anything new. You just forgot that those societies, the Spartans, the American Indians, all these things, the Vikings, they didn't connect to spirit on Sundays. It was something that was inherent to everything that they did. Right? And it didn't make that's the warrior's path. And so we open an understanding through broadcasting, continual broadcasting, that we're walking a warrior's path. And that's where we come from with Vital Warrior. That's why it's called Vital Warrior. We are all, even if you haven't been in a war, we're fighting the same thing. It's not just veteran, it's not just the communities that we're serving, it's a human thing. And it's fear. It's fear of change, it's fear of not being successful, fear of all that. We teach them how to develop the courage and the strength and the awareness that fear is present, and we accept it, and we can use that as a tool to project through it. And by doing that and developing that, we develop a strength and to be able to broadcast a truth. And that broadcasting of the truth is what will lead them to what it is we're broadcasting, and for them to take action. At the end of the day, it comes down to taking action and responsibility for one's own perceptions and one's own situations and experiences. And the way you do that is, show up and just do what's in front. As Hadi Jivan says, no, just do everything that's in front of you as accurately as possible. Don't worry about all up here and all back here and what's happened. And that's the key.
Yeah.
That's the other side of it. So
it's beautiful. Thank you. It's a wonder. Like that was very, just that, I think this is the exact kind of target radar that we're looking for in terms of ins in different communities to bring something we know works. We have a technology that works. Whether it's Kundalini Yoga or just mindfulness or breath work in general, we know that breathing deeper creates a deeper nervous system, which creates a deeper humanity and a deeper desire to do good as a human being. It's just this is something we know. But then the question is how to take that knowing without being, without being preachy. With the Yogi Bhajan said, we're teachers, not preachers. Without being preachy, but also all of the huge conversation right now just about all sorts of levels of appropriation and all sorts of, how to kind of unpack our own kind of ideas of what we think, we know, and what we've been educated and societally and in race and economics, how we've been, and that stuff is very it's real, and it's also, if you're not looking at it, it can be very invisible, and that's something we've come against in certain ways at Rama East, and I think just in general, it's such a huge conversation, and so.
Don't you think that, like, generally speaking, as a human consciousness level, that more and more people are discovering kind of like the moths to the flame type thing, like they're starting to move over to this naturally? What do you?
I mean, that's my experience. Is that your experience? In every single part of society, it's happening. From the women in Saudi Arabia, like we had women flying from Kuwait, Abu Dhabi, all sorts of places in the Middle East to come and practice Kundalini Yoga with us, to just wherever we are. But I mean, is that, you guys can speak to that?
I really like the fear as a stimulus concept. I think across the world, everyone's tired of being afraid.
Yeah.
And instead of saying, oh, I have to just survive this, it's like tapping into that well of human lineage and resilience, of recognizing, okay, I can channel this, I can use it, this is going to push me to get things done. And Yogi Bhajan said it, like exactly where we are is where we need to be. Everything being uprooted, flipped upside down, everything we thought was an honor system with our Constitution as a country, we're finding all the holes in the cracks, and we're discovering a third way. We're discovering there's room for everyone at the table. Yeah. And people that have been disenfranchised before, we're seeing and recognizing the cost if they're not heard. This is what you pay when you don't have everybody representing. You have chaos, you have fear, you have people that are just stuck and wanting to give up. And so bringing it back to this sense of a wave, a unison, and how we have a practice that says it's safe. It's fine. You are exactly where you are. Sit on the mat, get going with it, feel yourself, sense yourself. Mm-hmm. This is free, this is yours. And people finding that, again, I see, I don't know if you guys can agree with me, a third way becoming available, where everybody just vibes right here. Mm-hmm. Everyone just says what works, what doesn't.
I was looking up some research this morning because I'm really into research reports. So I was on Nielsen's website, and I saw a few things that stood out. I think 1 in 3 people in America have now tried yoga, which is major. And then the media coverage of wellness and of taking care of yourself has increased like exponentially in the last 5 years. Yeah. And that is at the same time as our social media habits increasing, like hours over hours every week, which means we're seeing more coverage of personal well-being, and that's giving us permission to actually create time and space for it. So I think that's a huge factor, and we like sit around talking about how negative social media is and the media is, except that it's actually planting seeds in our head about, oh, should we be trying this yoga thing, or should we be finding that supermarket that's at Rama East next week that's got access to fruits and vegetables in a food desert, a historical food desert. Yeah. And that's what I think is really interesting. And I was thinking when you were talking about Sebastian Junger's book, Tribe, and I feel like you could write a follow-up to that. Okay. That's talking, you guys know what, what that book is, right? So it's talking about how when people come back from war and from being deployed, they went from a situation where they were with a lot of people, they were in community, to being alone. And I feel like your comments about fear are like the next iteration of that. So how do we build community, like the people sitting here, now that people have permission to actually take time and take care of themselves? Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I know.
Right.
Yeah, Lieutenant Grossman on killing. Yeah. I really felt that energy where, like you said, there's an appreciation for the tenacity of the warrior, and it's needed. But like you said, the warrior within has to be addressed and calmed.
I find that a lot of those, like you, it's perfect example of what you just said.
Yeah.
I find a lot of those literatures, they always stop at a certain point.
Yeah.
It's like they stop before the big answer, right?
Yeah.
Like they
We need different editors.
Yeah.
Here's an idea. Throw it up.
And they bring up great points.
Right.
They bring up a lot of great points.
Yeah.
One of the greatest sayings in the chief petty officers community is, if you bring up a problem and you don't come up with a solution to that problem or a suggestion to one, you're part of the problem.
Yeah.
So, I'm not saying that's the case with these books, but it's a lot of times we have that, right? We talk about all the nuances of the problem, but never they typically don't follow through with the solution. And what I've found in my personal experience, and is evidenced through just personal attainment, is that we have an answer.
Yeah.
We absolutely have an answer. This is the answer. Like, without a doubt. And anybody, you go on the Vital Warrior testimonial page of people that actually sit down and develop a practice in this. And I mean, we're talking lives being saved, families being saved. But, you know, it's one or two is enough. But we want more, of course. We want more of those.
Yeah.
And more of those are happening. I think you saw that.
Yeah, I just saw the email.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
that's
what
everything.
we do it for.
It makes
Yeah.
it all worth it.
That's what we do it for.
Saving lives. I was about to kill myself and didn't. Okay. Well, that's a successful mission.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah.
You know, now, and what happens is, and this is what I'd love to see, is these people that were there, I can't wait. I can't wait to see what they create from it.
Yeah.
What they create with that story. As they gain the experience and the strength of peeling back the layers of all the stuff that had them on the edge of death. What they make of it and how many lives they save. That's the payoff. I mean,
Which is what was, without giving anything away, a beautiful part of. I loved that nuance in the film.
you saw it.
Everyone's going to see this film. What's the name of it?
Message in a Bottle.
Message in a Bottle. Yeah, I loved that part of it. Yogi Bhajan said, "I have something that I'm giving you something for humanity that's going to make you happy, healthy, and holy, but that doesn't mean it's going to be easy." And that is, that's part of the, and the thing about it, and this is again, I think this is the biggest question for all of for everyone, why you wouldn't come to class, why you won't do your meditation, you need to do, why, for all of us, we all have the different levels of the battles that we're fighting, but, and we know with Kundalini Yoga, it doesn't take that long. It takes a very short amount of time, but you do have to do something. But Yogi Bhajan said that the amount of energy that is basically upholding your unhappiness or your neurosis is the same amount of energy that would be making you happy. And literally there's no difference in energy expenditure, but how to really be able to translate that and not have that lost in translation. And of course, one of the only ways that we know that we can truly translate it is by being role models. Because, people see that you're doing what you're doing, and they want a piece of that, or they want to know more about that. And especially when they know that, you came from my neighborhood, you were a veteran, these are important pieces of the puzzle. What other parts of the puzzle do you feel like need to be in place, both for leaders and for communities who want to affect change, in our psychology, in our rhetoric, in our action, in order to make wellness more available on a global level to anybody who wants to partake? What do you think?
I mean, I think that historically wellness has looked one way, and it's only felt accessible to one type of person for at least my lifetime. I'm 32. And seeing that change and seeing the breadth of options shift creates the accessibility that I think we've been waiting for.
Yeah.
I think from a leadership standpoint, it really is helping each community member be a self-sufficient healer of everyone around them. And so if I'm coming at it from a corporate standpoint or just a community leadership standpoint, what actual tangible skills can I give to you that you can then teach to others as being the older grandmother or the aunt, whatever that may look like, whatever your access is, having the recognition that you're your own healer, that your wellness is within your means each day in a practice and your breath work and your movement, and then sitting and being really curious with one another about how that's going. Mm-hmm. Do I understand you correctly? Is this the first time you meditated and it was only a minute? Good. And supporting one another in that way. So from a leadership standpoint, empowering other leaders. So there's not just one anymore.
Right.
I think one of the biggest things as a leader and a teacher is, and it'll always come back to this, is the discipline of self. And what I mean by that is, and there's a myriad of reasons, but in particular to this, is we have to maintain a discipline of what it is we're projecting. And we have to have a consistency and there has to be a constant frequency of vibration that people can attune themselves to. And what I mean by that is if I'm out as a leader and I'm doing my thing in front of the camera, but then I go over here and I'm doing something that's in polarity to the aforementioned, then, I mean, that's going to lower the effect of what it is I'm broadcasting, right? So it has to be real. People have very good noses for a lack of truth. Yeah. And if you aren't really experiencing these types of things, and you're just like saying the lines, phoning it in, you haven't had an experience because you haven't done the work, but you're getting up there as a leader, that house of cards will fall. It will absolutely fall, and you will cause more damage than to the people that were listening to you, and the societal psychology that you're adding to the problem exponentially, because what it does is it causes walls to be built against. See, I knew it. I told you. You know, or you become something that people depend on, and then you fall. You take a lot of people with you because you didn't build a strong foundation. It's okay as a leader if you're flying that plane while it's being put together. You just got to be honest about it. People will follow you on that journey, and it's even more inspirational when you get to that point. They have a clear roadmap. Oh, he fell here, and then, you know, be transparent. Don't hide humanity, that you're human, because you are. I don't care. It's when that we have to develop the space to be able to keep that thing going through.
Yeah, especially the younger and younger generations are so sensitive to incongruency in leadership. I mean, it's going to become more. This is why the future is bright, no matter what, you know, is happening right now. Although we've had some interesting things happen in the past week, so I think things are moving. You know, there's definitely things moving, but the future's bright because the younger generations, the incongruency in leadership and in what's being said and what's being done is, I mean, they can smell it 500 light years away. That's
why
just
you
kind
call
of
it the Rama Foundation, right?
Yeah. I don't get that joke. I think it's a man joke. Hold on. We'll explain it to you.
No, Okay, so you're creating a foundation to which they can build their house.
There it is. Okay. I thought it had something to do found, and but I do like I was watching, or I was not watching, but I came across social media. I was scrolling, which by the way, when we were on the steps, both Adele and I, in as we were hallucinating on hour 13 and a half, we both were trying to scroll up the page of Jumji. So you're a social media addict when you're on the steps in India with a piece of paper going like this. We both did it. We admitted it separately. I was scrolling up the page. She's like, oh my God, so was I. But I was scrolling and there was some, social media yoga teacher, influencer type who has a lot of followers. I mean, a lot, 500,000 or something like this. And in her feed, she was having a public kind of, breakdown, basically, which people are having right now. It's a very difficult time on the planet. And if you don't have a foundation, a solid foundation that is consistent, even even people who have positioned themselves as wellness leaders are obviously, that doesn't mean anything on social media, but they're having a hard time. So this woman was being transparent in a certain way, but my opinion of that was that she was really basically, the messaging was, look, I do yoga every day, and it's not really helping, because I'm still having a nervous breakdown. And so, these things are, it's really, really nuanced, and it is really complex, because my experience of it was she's basically telling the 399,000 people who are following her just to look at her doing a yoga posture. They're not actually doing the yoga. They're not gonna try it now, because it obviously doesn't work. She's having a mental breakdown. I'm having a mental breakdown. I was looking for somebody who's going to help me not have a mental breakdown. So I think it's a nuanced situation, and I think a lot of, I don't know your age, we're kind of not millennials, but I think there's a millennial and younger, there's a little bit of a TMI thing on the social media scene where it's I'm going to be vulnerable, I'm going to share this, but then, I think this is a big part of how we become better leaders.
Yes, that's what I was saying about, we have to be disciplined about what we broadcast. Yeah. I do mean transparency.
Yeah.
But I don't mean, dismantle take a sledgehammer to the walls either.
Yeah.
So
Can we talk about inauthenticity and the cost on wellness and well-being for a minute?
Yeah, let's talk about it. I love this.
So there was a film that came out maybe 2 years ago called Ingrid Goes West.
Yes.
Right? And that was the first film that really touched on social media and loneliness and depression. And it was beautifully written. Aubrey Plaza was in it, and she nailed it. But I think that there's a lot of inauthenticity, especially in wellness and health right now. At the same time, we've got the highest numbers in loneliness globally than we've ever had. And people are looking at media, and we're in this cycle of media where we know that selfies and certain ways of posturing actually encourage growth in our audiences. So we're trying to get our messages out there, but we're doing it in a specific way that just continues the feedback loop and actually affects people, increases loneliness. And then you see a breakdown like this, and that doesn't drive you to yoga necessarily.
Right.
Right? And we know that in Kundalini, we have responses to, of course, you're going to be dealing with stuff every day, and here's what you do to move through it and move past it. But we need to see a major shift in messaging around wellness. Yeah. Even though it's improved, there's more access, we need to see a change in the way that leaders in wellness talk about wellness, because it's inauthentic and it's going to cost us a lot. The fall is going to be grand.
Yeah, I'm with you 1,000% on this. And at the same time, I feel like the real understanding of the matrix of artificial intelligence and how it's running social media, and how basically just as it's been in the age that we came from, but now it's in a technological space, you are rewarded for taking your clothes off. You're rewarded for selling yourself on the cheap. You're rewarded so they pump up the likes so that people are still doing. And Yogi Bhajan said in the sensory system lecture, I was talking about this yesterday, there's a lecture he gave about, what's happening in this change of age. And he said, it's about who's naked, who's more naked than that. And that's basically the artificial intelligence algorithms are still pumping that pattern into the mainframe of the matrix. And if you're not woke, basically, I don't care whether you're Reiki 3 practitioner, if you're not actually decalcifying your pineal gland and understanding that this is a matrix and it either uses you or you use it, then we're in the same. It doesn't matter whether wellness, not wellness. And that's why I'm always looking for the most spiritual people in the world, it's like Tej has the biggest class, the Kundalini class in the world on the daily basis, and she didn't even have a Facebook page. They had to convince her to do a Facebook page. But no, and this is so when you're looking, and it doesn't mean that you can't use these broadcasts, because you can, because then you get the people who are like, oh well, then I can't use the social media, or I can't use the you can use it, but it will use you, because that's how artificial intelligence is. So. But yeah, we have a major issue in wellness, and I think this is part of the reason why we have barriers to entry, because we if you're drinking the Kool-Aid and you don't realize how irritating we are in the wellness scene, no, you have to understand, how much of a barrier that is to people who are fighting for their lives.
Right. Yeah, and like you said, the concept of resilience in that story, where Yogi Bhajan said personally and personal, where, I'm sharing this story, it's not for me. It's not for me to have a meltdown and to get necessarily all this fake, empathy and things like that, because it's so surface level. There's only so far you can go in these mediums. And if all I share with you is my pain, I only use it as a dumping ground, then what I put out is what I'm creating more of.
Yeah.
Those are the seeds I'm planting, as you mentioned, in each of those followers' minds, that, oh, this is what a breakdown looks like. There's no story in it. There's no purpose in the sense of, how am I getting through this? What's working? I tried the breath work. It didn't work. But I'm going to try again. I'm going to keep focusing on something to build myself and build my community around that concept where we all rise, versus, again, just dumping and using social media as a means to just 5 minutes feel better. I don't feel that it has much long-term effect when we share that story and hit send. From a behavioral perspective, I start getting really fixated again on those likes. It's like my little cookie, and now I'm not even feeling the positive effects of the empathy that's coming my way, because I haven't attained the number of likes I did on my last post. And so it's this artificial reinforcing system that does not bring us together when there's no awareness of self to begin with. And if we don't have a clear, disciplined idea of what resilience in this teaching looks like, what am I trying to get out of this practice? How many push-ups am I going to crank out? Whatever that looks like for each individual, share that truth. But stopping at the point of just dumping my emotions and no sense of responsibility for the community's effect. Again, it's just irresponsible in that sense. But
you bring up a great point, and it goes straight back to what I was saying about being disciplined about how and what we project. And coming from my perspective in the veterans community or the service-oriented community, it goes strictly to that. Why is it we do what we do? Why are we wanting to get these teachings out there? Why are we doing this for ourselves? For me, it comes down to service. And if I'm having an issue and I'm going to post something that I'm going through this issue, why am I making that post? Why is it we do what we're doing? If it's coming from a place of service, truly coming from a place of service, it can't fail. It's going to have that service-oriented thing, and it goes straight to what you were just saying. It was like, if you broadcast it in a way like, yeah, I'm going through a nervous breakdown or whatever, and then this is how I'm attacking this thing. This is how I'm going through it. This is what tools I'm using so that other people can use those tools if they're going through it. And then they see you come out the other side, you haven't, smashed the pot, so to speak,
Yeah. And just to feed on that, I think showing vulnerability, especially changing, like you said, the toxic masculinity of crying, of being weak, of having fear and doubt, and showing the perseverance, because we all have fear, we all get nervous speaking, or whatever it is, bringing your unique perspective is worthwhile in sharing. But my heart and my intention is lined up in a place that says, this is where I'm headed. Come with me, help me get there. It's an imploring of being connected, not just here, but making some real change. So,
how do you think we can do better? Because the age of Aquarius is an age of service, and how do you think we can do better in the wellness industry, in the journalistic industry, in the therapeutic? What do we need to do better?
Well, I think it kind of is reciprocal. I think you just, connected the perfect circle, so to speak.
Yeah.
It comes down to self. First of all, we have to get better at practicing developing our own practice, increasing our own frequency and our broadcasting power.
Right.
I mean, that's, and it's the core of Vital Warrior. It comes down to like that epiphany that I had that I was talking about. It comes down to the individual. It has to be driven from the individual level, from the roots. Otherwise, we're just treating, the symptoms of everything. It has to come from the roots. And that's the only way that systemically it's going to change.
Yogi Bhajan, he said it yesterday in White Tantric, but one of his favorite words was grassroots. He loved that term because it really, think about everything that has ever changed the course of human history. It's one individual who has radiated, who has made the brave choice to radiate a different opportunity and a different experience, a different reality on planet Earth. It's one individual and this is, everyone who is in the position or wants to be in the position of being a change maker. You can look at it one way and say, okay, it's bourgeois navel gazing to think that it's about your own practice, but if you're not magnetic, nobody's going to follow you.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then just to segue right into talking about roots, my experience, it all starts with childhood. The adverse childhood experience has been shown statistically that when you look at people who are struggling with addiction or any other malady in life, 2/3 of those people have had an adverse childhood experience.
Yeah.
And so if we stop, and this, if I can leave any one thing really, as adults in this room, if we can stop passing the buck. When we see someone else's child struggling, instead of judging that parent or rolling our eyes at the kid's inability to regulate themselves, step in. It takes 2 seconds to just go, what's going on? Oh, that sounds really hard. I guess you're not going to get it today. That's life. Your way isn't always going to happen. There will be stress. There will be things that happen, but you can get past it. You can pass your disappointment. And did I understand you? Did I understand you correctly? That's all every kid wants to know.
Yeah.
You heard me. I heard you and you're still not getting your way. That's really tough. But being present in that moment, if you could only know how much it means when I listen to kids, that's it. There's no magic cure. There's no $200 therapist. We save so much money, time, wellness, and the soil is fertile for these teachings. When a child knows, when they have the idea to change the world, someone's listening.
Yeah.
That it matters.
I got a question. So only 2/3 of kids have issues?
Seriously.
No. When they say, right, exactly, the last time Kaiser did the research, so
Yeah.
I'm sure it's been updated, but they're saying the adults now, right? Exactly.
Now
Let me
it's
check my phone.
99.9%.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
It's
Right.
doesn't everybody have
Everybody.
something happen to them?
Yeah, nobody just goes out
Yeah.
and starts using for
Right.
no reason. You know, yeah, it's like
I mean,
logical.
just as a human,
Right.
like things are gonna happen.
Well, I think there's the
Exactly.
1/3 that actually uses the actually is fueled by the adverse. You know, that's just my opinion. I think there's like a smaller amount of people who whatever kind of trauma they experienced in the childhood actually fueled them to do, or type Aism or whatever you want to whatever you want to call it. Yeah, you can call it whatever you want. Yeah, but so I think there's maybe that's the other third. It's like everyone had the trauma, but it's how you respond to it, and definitely I was saying this morning, which I got a lot of eye rolls from like the new people, but that mantra I taught this morning, that basically puts in the frequency on the planet Earth that the mothers of the children that are coming on, they don't hate themselves, or they don't disregard themselves, or they're not going to sell themselves on the cheap. And therefore, the self-destructive tendency is less. Therefore, the child has less of a self-destructive tendency. Therefore, the future changes. I mean, it's not that. I mean, it isn't. But and then if you have some children around who you can listen to and give. It's crazy how much you can affect the children around you. And Yogi Bhajan was really big into this. He's like, any children around you, teach them things. Like, teach them how to bless themselves. That was one of the things he said to teach the kids. Any children that are around that you're not going to be like a weirdo, talking to, children you're allowed to talk to. But just teach them how to bless themselves. Like that alone could change human history. Just a group of children who are going to become leaders, knowing how to be of self-blessing. I mean, it is that simple in some way.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I really want to keep on theme with the roots concepts and talk about the earth a little bit. So what I think is really interesting is this notion of an individualized approach to self-care and to wellness, and to combating some of these tropes we have around what wellness looks or feels like, and creating space in the next 2 to 5 years for people to figure out their own practices and validating that. But then I also think a lot about mushrooms and tree roots and how there's this whole set of mycelium underneath the ground that connect to each other, right? Trees are the original social networks. Mushrooms communicate with each other, and how that kind of plays into community and in the human incarnation. So we can do all these things as individuals to take care of ourselves, but if we're not doing it together in community, and thinking about our systemic effect and how it relates to systems, to government, to media, and then to the planet, how we treat the planet, then none of it's going to work. So it's this like bifurcated yin-yang, right? The individual and then also the community.
Got like a grid. It's just what we're talking about. Like, it's so powerful to look at the whole world and each other as grids, and each point being a flashpoint that just lights the other.
Yeah, and this is, the more and more this is where technology and the light side of the technological age, and Elon Musk was calling, what was the term that Elon Musk? Cybernetic collective. That's what we're creating through the technological age. These Rama TV and the social networks and these networks that we're creating. It is that in technology. That's where, that's why you have to have enough energy in your system to look at things from multiple perspectives, because technology, everything has multiple perspectives. So, and if we really want to affect change, and we've been having this conversation quite a bit, if you really want to be a change maker, you have to be able to see. I remember this spiritual teacher who was just a major heavy hitter said there was something going on in the Middle East where some, pretty heinous sexual crimes against humanity and against these women had happened. This was years ago, maybe a dozen years ago. And she said, if I can't put myself in, if I can't have compassion and in the perspective of both the portrayer, is that the right perpetrator? The perpetrator of the crime and the actual the people who have the victims, then I can't actually hold a kind of true spiritual and progressive ability to maneuver the matrix. I remember how powerful and how people really were offended by that in some way, but it is in order to actually be able to deal with the complexity of the issues that we're up against in all of our different communities, the complexities of the issues that we're up against on this planet, it's a requirement that you have to be able to see things without the kind of rigidity of your belief system. So I love having these conversations. Thank you so much. Do we have some very intelligent, better than my questions out there? Come on. This is it's a say no to drugs commercial. It's a fried egg of my brain after White Tantric. Yes.
Hi. Thank you for talking. I'm curious because of what we're discussing more, that sometimes it's difficult to recognize perhaps the impact you're able to make or able to stay on course just based on the barrage of misfortune that we get daily, most recently in the last couple of years. So I'm wondering if any three of you, four of you have techniques that you use to continue to be on that path and know that you're making an impact that is outside of like something that I would say a lot of the world globally understands is a positive impact.
Can I?
Yeah.
Okay, so if Huddy Jeevan was here, and I would ask questions just like that. Very similar questions to that. Everybody knows who Huddy Jeevan is, right? Huddy Jeevan's
He's the wizard behind the curtain.
Yoda. Think of Yoda. He'd say, the only thing you got to worry about is sitting down and doing what's in front of you as accurately as possible. Because I ask those broad stroke questions like that all the time. He's like, Yogi Bhajan, what he did, this is what he told me in India. Yogi Bhajan, what he did, he didn't go up here thinking about how he can do. He sat down and he did what was put in front of him as accurately as possible. He stayed right here doing things that were presented to him as accurately as possible. And that's the Mahan Tantra. So he didn't go up here looking at, all these different paths and up here. Huddy Jeevan's like, I don't go up here wondering all those things. I do what's in front of me as accurately as possible. And that starts with, for me, what that meant to me was my practice. My practice creates a path that is clearly defined, and it's definitely not where I thought I was going to be, or where I wanted to be, or what it was I wanted when I wanted it. My first service was a service to myself, and that sounds so cliche now that it just came out of my mouth, but it was. But it was true. It was true service. And had I had that when I was in the military, I would have been so much more effective as a leader and carrying out, Americans' missions. I wish I would have had that. Because then, when I came back, I wouldn't have had the other stuff. I would have had something to do with all the other stuff. But I also understand, as going through this journey, that all of my life's experiences brought me to that point. You've heard this a million times. Only through practice do we really understand it. All of our experiences brought us to a point to where we're at. And as you continue to practice, you'll keep going up these levels and overcoming different levels of adversity, that by doing that, you will become more of service to others. Because the people and things that are in your sphere of influence will recognize, and you'll become magnetic. And you will be service, not of service.
That's a good mic drop on that one. Because I was talking to, there's a woman at Rama, New York, who comes, and she works at the UN. and she works, I think she specifically works to organize a lot of people younger people who are coming to be of service, to do different things. And she said the burnout rate is so high, and the alcoholism, and just a lot of real issues among the younger kind of people who have ideas of coming and giving their time and their energy to change the world. And so she was asking me, about basically how can we bring these practices to the actual aid workers and people who are going on the front lines and trying to give their life of service. And I thought that was very interesting. I mean, I knew that to be true on a cognitive level, but to hear it just from someone who is on the front lines, in different areas of war and strife, and that the aid workers and the people who are going there, they have a lot of ideas, and ultimately if they don't take care of themselves, and then they're blowing off steam in the wrong ways, and there's all sorts of kind of insidious, I mean, just as any kind, anytime you bring people together, there's all sorts of, the sex and the drinking and all the issues that happen in a community that isn't in some way trying to elevate, and so they're not really helping very much. I mean, they're helping, but they're not. They last. She said it was like something really low. Like it's surprising how long it's less than 3 months. Like these people who come to volunteer, or if they're in some way they're having some stipend or something. So I thought that was an interesting piece of information, just in terms of we do have to. Teach, this is the big thing around this time, is that everything is becoming more vibrationally accurate, I guess would be the way that I would put it, so that if we're trying to be of service in our communities, and this is my whole thing against, like, I'm really like very grumpy about Burning Man culture and that kind of thing, because I just feel like if we could take all of that energy and money that we're putting to build a city in the middle of nowhere that is enlightened society, and put that back into our neighborhoods and actually build the art there and give the free things, your whatever you're making, giving pancakes and spankings or whatever you do. Like if you did that on your block on a Sunday, I mean,
Okay.
you definitely.
I gotta jump in here.
Yeah, pancakes and spankings.
So I just spent a week with the Burning Man nonprofit, which has 120 employees, where they brought in community developers, real estate people, nonprofit folks, policy folks, and it was called Collective Impact.
Okay, tell us what they're doing.
So this goes back to what Benny was saying. We spent 5 days figuring out what we could do in the next 3 to 5 years that would incrementally shift access to arts, wellness, opportunity, and community in cities. And it was fantastic.
I mean, that's cool, but it's like 25 years later. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, fair.
It's
but I agree with you. Like, yes, and they're now thinking about how do we actually do this in cities? How do we do this in distressed neighborhoods? What can we do?
That's very important, because that if we really start to think about how to create enlightened society in our neighborhoods, it'll change everything. The resources, the direction, how can we affect our neighborhood block? I mean, this changes everything. Yeah. I'm glad to hear that.
Just really quick to end that, because Krishna Kar gave me the biggest jewel, and she said, "Who am I to take away another person's suffering?" Because I was struggling with the same concept. I'm not doing enough, and I'm only not doing enough when I become attached to the outcome of what I'm doing. If you show up every day and you just serve, and you feel the joy in that, you feel the purpose in it, each moment then is an act of service. The smile at the old lady walking by, all of it matters, and it adds up to an accumulative number. You're better at all the numbers, but it matters. And so we trust that everything at any moment is exactly as it needs to be. And each individual suffering is their own purposeful suffering. I offer love and empathy so much, but I also recognize my limit in their journey, and I'm satisfied, and that's my mantra. Everything is exactly as it should be.
I mean, that's some sophisticated. That's a sophisticated game to play in this realm too, because it's very presumptuous for us to think that somebody shouldn't have, that somehow they shouldn't suffer, because all of us are here because we had enough suffering to make us do something besides what we were doing before. So it's a powerful thing. But then, where the tipping point, when the tipping point is where we're at, where we're here to catch the baby. Because then when you're ready for the thing to then the pathways. But great question, thank you. Anybody else want to take a stab at this? I committed to bad healthy gum an hour and 20 minutes ago, so I had to go strong on that choice and just keep it going here. So anybody else here? How much longer do I have to chew this gum? Any other comments, questions?
So I just have a comment. You mentioned earlier about the breath strengthening the nervous system.
Yeah.
And so my son is in high school, which, as we know, is very pressurized and its own situation.
Yes.
But what he does when
We don't think that microphone's on. Okay.
it doesn't want to pick up my sound current. What he does is when he sees kids that are stressed, he talks to them and he says, just take 3 deep breaths. So he just goes around spreading that.
How do they do with that? Do they beat him up or do they listen to him?
Yeah, no, they're listening to him.
They listen to him?
Yeah.
How
yeah.
cool.
Yeah, so he's doing that.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
beautiful.
And then, of course, I play the mantras for my grandchildren, my little 2-year-old.
You got to take all the credit for that. You got to take all the credit for that.
Yeah.
I want to say something about that. I just recently, it's great. I want to add to that within the military community, this type of work is becoming more and more prevalent as well.
Yes, it is.
I went down and I was pleasantly surprised. I went down and spoke to the Coast Guard station down in Long Beach. And I was talking about Vital Warrior and Rama and everything that's going on down there. And they're like, yeah, we have a whole, meditation and yoga program here on base. I was like, what? And they were like, yeah, they do it over there. They get in that building and they got like this nice facility. I was like, what? That's amazing. And we talk about that. But they're looking at developing stuff with us there to come down. And I think I mentioned it to you. But, but it was a very pleasant surprise that the Coast Guard is initiating that or has been implementing that to deal with stress, and giving them tools and techniques on how to manage it and incorporate it, So it's good that it's good that these seeds are starting to grow.
Yeah, and this is just the beginning. I mean, Yogi Bhajan said that these places, and I mean, it's on military bases, it's, all of these different places that are popping up for people to find some piece of themselves that is there, and they've just, gotten disconnected from it. This is the Starbucks of the Aquarian Age, and I think it's just a matter of time to how accessible this will be, and so want to thank all of the Rama East teachers who are here, who are representing at Rama East, and Emily for what you're doing, and then all of you for what you're doing in your communities, and all of you for being here, and all of you out there. Let's keep growing, and let's get better, and let's continue to be lighthouses so that whatever bridge you are to your communities, you can get stronger. So thank you. Bless you, Satnam.
Thank you, Satnam.